Hello everyone, Shelby Burnett here, back with a little bit of information about what I learned in Hawaii and why it was so life-changing for me, and I hope life-changing for you, this information or my experience on board. When I went and did the Hawaii run, it was out of California. So a couple things to know about cruising that maybe some of you cruisers do know is that if you are out of California, you have a 5-day at sea run, and then you're 5 nights in Hawaii at the different islands, and then you're 5 nights back. So it's a 15-day cruise out of California. And I think most people think that California is all about Hawaii run is all about newlyweds. However, because it's a 15-day cruise, most young people don't have that much time to cruise. So there were a few, but not many. In fact, our insider, I didn't say this, but it was coined term, as a crew would call it, the newlyweds and the nearly deads. And what that meant naturally was that we had a lot of elderly people. Now, I was cruise staff at this point, and I also love to get to know the people, and I'm very fascinated with people that are married 50 years or longer. And while there were a lot of that type of clientele on all of the Princess Cruises that I had hosted, this particular run I think had the most 50-year plus married, and just older people in general. And in fact, I recall having wheelchairs like lined up in front of the Princess Theater, whereas you sometimes have wheelchairs and walkers. It was like we had to do parking. We literally had to do parking for the wheelchairs and the walkers and help them into their seats and things like this. This was something that the cruise staff did. I was working very, very closely with the passengers, and I would sit with them for cocktails, and I would ask them questions. I interviewed a lot of married couples. Oh gosh, that reminds me of a fun little story. Maybe I can fit it into this one. So, one of the biggest things I learned on the Hawaii run that really stuck with me as a young person was that most of these elderly people that were coming on board to do Hawaii, it was their life's dream. It was their trip of a lifetime. They had saved their entire lives to come to Hawaii. So this started, I did about 6 months in Hawaii. So this started to resonate with me as a pattern. Like I'd say, something about Hawaii, and they would be like, yeah, we've been waiting our whole lives. We've been wanting to do this since we got married 50 years ago. And those types of thought processes. And then I also started to notice that they weren't very happy, because the 5 nights out to sea in the Pacific Ocean is very rocky for a regular cruise. Most people that have cruised will tell you it doesn't really rock much. It's not a boat, it's a ship, and all of that I agree with. However, this particular run, and it was on a smaller vessel, which it normally is, because to get into these Hawaiian islands, you do need a smaller vessel. It wasn't on one of these mega ships. Well, in fact, they didn't really have mega ships back then. They had, I think their biggest one was like 3,000 passengers. Now the biggest is like 6,000, maybe 7 actually. I think Royal Caribbean just came out with the biggest ship in the world, the Wonder something. Tell me if you know it. It's hard to keep up. They're making them all the time. But 6,000 or 7,000 passengers. These are more like 1,500 passenger ships. So anyway, it's not as big as the other one, so it rocks even more. And that Pacific Island run, it is rocky on the way out and the way back, and they were so uncomfortable and very scared, because they're elderly and their bodies just weren't functioning as well as they do when we're younger. And even as a young person, I could honor that. And I also noticed, they complained about the food, even though the food was fantastic, but because they're used to the food at home and they're elderly, their stomachs were used to their own thing, and they had different interactions with the drugs, and the salt content in the food is much different on ships due to this desalinating water. So there was just a lot of things. that were not so comfortable. And then, of course, getting onto the tender, which is a small boat that brings you to the island. So you get off the big boat, you get onto a small boat, which is like one of their lifeboats, and you get brought to the islands that have even smaller ports. And those are usually the coolest islands because they're not so overridden with people. However, many of the elderly people didn't feel comfortable or didn't want to get onto this tender because it's pretty rocky. So I started to really notice that there was a significant difference in the quality of your vacation experience, even though the vacation experience was phenomenal. The food was fantastic. The ship was very beautiful. The entertainment was great. The ports were amazing. They didn't love the experience because they weren't physically comfortable. And it really made me, and at that point I could sleep on like a brick bench and be okay, and with like a couple shots of tequila and a beer, and I'd be like, that's fine, whatever, I'll sleep here. I wouldn't need a pillow. I'd be fine. In our 20s and in our early 30s, I think most of us are really, we'd obviously take it for granted because we haven't been older yet. We don't have back problems. We don't have knee problems. We don't have stomach problems. We just don't have that many problems. So I enjoyed Hawaii immensely. And I didn't mind the rocking and the rolling, and I didn't mind the crazy bouncy ships, and I didn't mind the tenders and climbing out of things. And, it was really an adventure for me, but not for them. And I felt so bad for them because I was like, they waited their whole lives. They spent all their money. They waited to spend all this money on such a great opportunity to go see Hawaii, but yet they didn't enjoy themselves. So the lesson that I really learned was that you should not wait to travel. And I mean this with as much respect. I'm still friends with some 70-plus-year-olds, and they're really, really fit, and they don't have any issues at traveling. However, I also know that that's not the norm. The norm is, as we get older, things happen. We get hurt, we physically get worn out, we have some medical issues here and there that are not so easy to deal with. So what I learned, what that run taught me, was that you should travel as much as you can, as young as you are, and just don't wait. A couple other things I learned on those Hawaii runs, because again, we had a lot of time with the guests, so I was always asking for more input. I never thought I knew it all. I thought I could learn from these great people. My funniest one is the one where I say, it's called the keep 'em too pooped to pop story. So here we go. So picture this. We're on the Regal Princess, and we have an older couple that watching around the ship just flirt with each other. He smacks her little bum. They're in their 80s. He smacks her little bum on the way by and says, isn't she a cutie? She's my girl. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they are too cute. I'm like, okay, you have to tell me what keeps a marriage together after 50 years. And she says, okay, dear. Now, why don't you meet me in the Adagio tonight for a glass of wine, and I'll tell you. And I was like, okay, what time? She's like, 7 o'clock. And I was like, 7 o'clock, the Adagio. I'll be there, dressed to the nines. It's formal night. We got all dressed up back then. I'm in my beautiful gown. She's in her cute little pleated gown that I think probably was, probably made in 1972, and it's still adorable. She kept it in great shape. So you're picturing us. She goes, okay, let's get a glass of wine, sweetie. So okay, great. I love wine. So we sit down at the cocktail table, and we have a sip of wine. And she says, well, I guess there's two things. The first one, I don't think you'll have any problems with. The second one, I don't know. She goes, the first one is, keep active, keep your figure. It's good to be on the go. And the second one is, how shall I say, keep 'em too pooped to pop anywhere else. A man's sex drive never dies. Wine, oh almost came out my nose. But I had this beautiful dress I didn't want to ruin, and I didn't want to embarrass myself. So I did what you do when you're about to take a sip of wine and almost choke. You know, you hold it in. And tears were running down my face, and I was like, well, that's some great advice. I will share that with my boyfriend, who is my husband now. Keep him too poop to pop anywhere else. And we have that little joke. So I don't know. I think that's quite a funny thing. Those are the things I learned on the Hawaii run. Was YOLO, you only live once, travel as soon as you can, and also keep them too poop to pop anywhere else. I'm Shelby, you're fabulous. Follow me, Cruise Director, on all your podcast streaming places like Spotify and Apple. Bye-bye for now.